I know Senator Leahy needs, he's been around a few years representing Vermont in the Senate, so he needs no introduction. He's familiar to all of you, but just to reiterate for all of you, he is pro tem of the United States Senate, chair of the Appropriations Committee, senior most member of Judiciary and Agriculture Committees, ranking member of an Appropriations Subcommittee on State Department and Foreign Operations, and the senior most member of the United States Senate. But aside from all of those things and all of the many accomplishments he's had over all of his years in political life serving Vermont and the United States, I think one of the things that, and he's not going to expect me to say this, but one of the things I found out today that I know you're probably going to be most proud of is next year in 2022, the senator and Marcel will have been married 60 years. So congratulations on that. That'll be quite an accomplishment.
I think she deserves a gold medal for putting up with that long, but it's I'm very fortunate because I would not be here without her and her constancy.
I hear you, and we all appreciate you being here and for Marcel's support of you over all of these years of your political life. Listen, we've got a few things that we zeroed in on that we thought we'd talk to you about, but if it's okay with you, if there's any subject matter you would like to start with, to just share, whatever insights or, whatever is on the top of your mind with these Vermont credit union leaders, we can start there, or we can get into, other subjects.
No, I just be very, very brief on one thing. I had my choice of being to either chair Judiciary or Appropriations, and I took Appropriations because the big states have all kinds of ability to send down literally hundreds of lobbyists and all that for things they need from the state. With us, it's, especially when it comes to money, it's just me. And I took Appropriations because it will cover everything in Vermont, from our small hospitals. Marcel and I are going to visit a couple of them next week. And they've survived in this pandemic. She's a medical surgical nurse, so that will really want to do that. But then our hospitality industry and so many parts of our industry in Vermont, and our schools getting people back. And what I've been trying to do is find out where we can best help with federal funds. The state's doing a very good job, but I'll get the federal funds. And I thought it's probably most important for Vermont for me to be chairman of Appropriations. And so that's why I took it. But go ahead, you have questions, Joe. And incidentally, Joe and I have known each other so long. When I first knew him, his hair was dark, and I actually had some. So that shows you how long it's been. But Joe, I'm going to mute myself, and you go ahead.
Well, thank you, Senator. Thanks for reminding me my hair used to be dark. I appreciate that. And a couple of housekeeping things as we get started here. If everybody, when you're not speaking, if you'd mute your line, that would be great, whether you're on the phone or connected, by video here. And then the other thing is that if you have any questions, because there's so many of us, we'll monitor the chat box that you can make appear on the right side of your screen. So feel free to put comments or questions in that chat box, and we'll monitor that along the way. To get us started, and I know the arrangement of who's where on your screen is different for all of us, but I'm looking at the upper left-hand corner at you, Rob Miller, from VACCU. And I know you and I were talking about the Safe Banking Act coming up in the Senate this year, and it's already had a track record in the last Congress. And I know as VACCU and what you do with the cannabis industry in Vermont, that you probably are the most attuned to that issue. So I wondered if you might be willing to chat about that for a second.
Sure. Thank you, Joe. Yes. And Senator, thank you very much for your support of Vermont through the crisis, the amount of funds that have flowed into Vermont from the federal government, I think have been meaningful and certainly have provided the state the opportunity to manage through the crisis as best it can. So thank you very much. I guess my question for you, Senator, it pertains to the Safe Banking Act. We continue to have a conflict between state and federal law. And the Safe Banking Act, while it doesn't provide full legalization of marijuana, it does provide a safe harbor for financial institutions like ours that provide financial services to what are legally state legalized entities within the state, and help the state avoid what would otherwise be a public safety concern if those businesses didn't have access to financial services. So I guess my question for you, Senator, is what do you think the probability that the current Congress will take up the Safe Banking Act, and what's the possibility that it could get approved?
But as you know, Bob, it was last year or last Congress, they tried, and in fact, I was a co-sponsor, and it did not get through. I've talked to a number of the other co-sponsors, and I'm co-sponsoring it again this year. It's been referred to the banking committee. The banking committee, I think, may be more friendly to it because they're pointing out this has nothing to do with the question of whether a state legalizes or doesn't legalize marijuana and cannabis. Just saying that if you do it and it's done legally, you ought to be at least able to go to a bank and put your money in there and not have it sitting in a safe in your office or something like that. And that's the argument they're going to make, is your state can do whatever it wants on legalizing it. But if it is legal, your banks should be able to have the same kind of banking provisions for the people operating legally as you would if somebody was selling beer and wine from their store or anything else. So it didn't make it last time. I'm a little bit more optimistic this time.
Is there anything we can do, Senator, to provide support for its passage?
I think the best thing to do is look at some of the key people in banking and check their states and have some of your colleagues from those states call them in just a nice way. Say, hey, you're taking care of the corner liquor store, and we appreciate that. And protecting their deposits. Take care of this too.
Well, thank you for your support and co-sponsoring of the bill. I think it's an important and common sense measure. So thank you.
You know, Rob, I think I'm not sure, but your credit union certainly is the predominant provider of financial services to the dispensaries in the state of Vermont. And I know nationwide, most of the institutions providing financial services, I think, are still credit unions, wherever they're providing financial services. But still, it's a small number of institutions total. And I know that this subject isn't, of widespread concern to large swaths of credit unions because they're not all doing it. But I can't help but think that if one of the reasons there's not big swaths of credit unions thinking about providing financial services to this business sector is because of the lack of a safe harbor, like addressed in the Safe Banking Act, or whatever it's called this time around.
Yeah, I think that's true, Joe. And I think it's also the cost to provide those services in terms of the regulatory and compliance cost, particularly in a state like Vermont that has a really small market compared to some of the other states like Colorado and Washington. So you really have very limited opportunity to make up for some of those costs and the new business that you bring in. So you have to be kind of committed to the the financial access argument and the public policy to ensure that those businesses have access.
Thank you. Bob Morgan, I'm thinking of you, one, because you're in the upper right-hand corner for me, and that's where I'm looking right now. And two, because,
Joe, hold on just a second. I've got a call coming here.
sure.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yeah. Yeah. Tell the secretary I'll be right there. Bye-bye.
Okay to proceed? So Bob, I know, as we've been through this pandemic in the past year and everything, service to consumers, particularly in rural areas, has been a concern and sometimes a challenge because of, broadband limitations and so on and so forth. And I'm reminded that your credit union back, and I forget exactly when it was, but in recent history, um, uh, established a branch in Alberg, I think it was, replacing a bank that had left the community. And you have branched into a number of different pretty rural areas and whatnot in recent years. I'm just wondering if you could chat about that for a second.
Sure. And thank you, Senator, for joining us today and for all your hard work for Vermonters. It is really appreciated by all of us and all of our members. Yeah, I think it's with North Country and frankly with every credit union that's here. We live in a rural state, and there's articles around with banks doing branch closings nationally and such. And one of the things I'm most proud of our Vermont credit unions is the number of physical presences and physical locations we have in this tiny rural state. I think we do a really good job. If you look at all the counties, all 14 counties that we have in Vermont, at having access to affordable financial services available in near proximity for virtually every Vermont. It's certainly something that we are committed to, and I think it's something that all of my credit union peers are as well. And we just, we're proud of that. And as you are in Washington and hear discussions about ensuring access to affordable financial services for people of all means, we want you to be aware of the effort to maintain that.
Unmuting here. Bob, I appreciate that. I was born and raised in the huge city of Montpelier, but both my mother and my wife were born in the Northeast Kingdom, and I'm aware of small towns, and I'm aware of how sometimes the credit union and the loan gas station and the loan dentist and so on. I mean, these are vital circumstances. So I appreciate what you said. Incidentally, one of the things that has concerned me as you were talking about that and the access in these areas is data security. And I've tried to help Norwich University and Champlain College in Burlington get money and all, training people in cybersecurity. That when I was a young prosecutor in Chittenden County, we had bank robbers who would come in with a gun and say, fill up the bag with money and go out. Now, of course, the robber could be 10,000 miles away, and you don't even know who it is. They're trying to get in or freeze your accounts and hold it for ransom and so on. And well, that wasn't on so much on the agenda. I just want you to know that it is a matter I've asked my judiciary staff to, and we've actually added a couple of people just working on cybersecurity areas, because I think it's one of the huge dangers you're facing, but so many other businesses. Look at the medical center in Burlington. they've spent millions upon millions of dollars because their computers got frozen. How many credit unions could get wiped out if somebody come in there and change around all your accounts and everything else? So I just mentioned Joe and the others. If you get questions that come up on cybersecurity areas, I know that's on the agenda today, but feel free to send it to me or to my staff, because we are constantly trying to figure out where you plug these holes. I was on a long call, and I've got to go back to it in a few minutes with our new Secretary of Defense. I have to use a special secure phone to do that. But it's frightening. You just hear talking about all the kinds of attacks, thousands a day, against our business and our government agencies in the United States on cyber attacks. And I worry about, I mean, Bob, you talked about the need in small towns, and I just worry what that does to a small town if the credit union is suddenly pretty much knocked out.
Yeah.
Sometimes for months.
Sure. I want to mention while you're speaking, our at North Country Head of Information Technology on this Zoom, Scott Driver, sent around a little note in the chat just wanting to thank you for your efforts in devoting those cybersecurity resources to the state of Vermont. I think he really speaks for all credit here, so thank you so much.
Thank you. I did tell somebody that the change when I was state's attorney in Chittenden County Saturday afternoon. Police came to our house and said, we need a warrant because a bank in South Burlington had been robbed. I said, I didn't know anything about it. He said, well, it just happened about 45 minutes ago. I said, well, how do you know who to go after? So, well, the guy comes in, has his hand in his pocket, hands a note to the teller, says, I've got a gun in my pocket. Fill up this bag with money. Of course, the teller did. And he left. I said, yeah, but how do you know who it is? Well, he wrote the note on the back of one of his deposit slips. I said, come on, you're just teasing me. No, they showed it to me. So I said, I got to go with you when you arrest this guy. Well, we got the search warrant, we got the warrant, we come bombing into his house, and he's sitting on the couch, and he's got the $5 bills, the $10 bills, the $20 bills, all lined up, counting them, and the bag from the bank. And of course, the police have guns drawn. He's like this. They said, how'd you find me? And this grizzled old sergeant said, because you're stupid. I said, Sergeant, just warn him of his rights. That'll be enough. I'm going back home. But as you know, it's a different world today. And Joe, I got time for one more, Joe, and then I really do have to go.
Okay, Senator, and thank you very much for that. And if only it was so easy to track down all the cyber criminals like it was with the guy with the deposit slip, life would be so much easier for all of us. So one more area I wanted to get to, I'm seeing, John Dwyer on my screen, CEO of New England Federal Credit Union. And I know that over the past year, and this is a concern of yours, Senator, as well, supporting small, well, not just small, but all businesses in Vermont and nationwide, has been critically important. And I know many credit unions have been involved not only in providing paycheck protection program support for businesses of all sizes, but in a whole lot of other ways too. And I know John's credit union has done a lot in that area. So I thought, John, you might be happy to share some of that information with us.
Thanks, Joe. And I will be brief, Senator. I respect, obviously, your demanding schedule, but nice to talk to you again. And thank you for your ongoing support. As you may recall, over the years, we've spoken often about the business lending cap that we are still limited by. in the credit union industry. And I just wanted to point out a couple of facts. One is that all of the credit unions, or actually many of the credit unions in the state, were very successful in the PPP program, both in 2020 and so again this year. In fact, in 2020, over 40 million in loans, over 1,100 loans were originated. And I point that out because we continue to face bank consolidation. And what that's leading to is we're getting more and more requests for business lending. With out-of-state control of banks, NEFCU is now the largest Vermont-based financial institution. It's not something we talk about that often, but in the context of the industry, the credit unions are much more significant in business lending. So you may see, and we'll work with your staff if this happens, but you may see either a temporary request to increase the member business lending cap for credit unions, or we would obviously like a more permanent lifting of that cap. But it is still an issue for us. Not this year, probably not next year, but it will come at us. And it is something that we certainly believe is important because we want to be part of Vermont's rebuild as we come out of COVID. So we have supported businesses and we want to continue to. So we look for your support.
John, I'm glad you mentioned that. I know Emily's on the call and she's noticing it, and we will follow up on that. You should take some comfort in the number, and I make dozens, sometimes hundreds of calls around the state of Vermont during the week, just how you doing, how's it going. The number of businesses who told me when COVID hit, and in the PPP loans and others, they said if it wasn't for our credit union, I mean, they met after hours, they met on Saturdays, they just worked like mad. We kept us going. I didn't have to lay people off. I kept going. And the praise, and Joe, I should have called you at the time, just tell you, but the praise, John, that all of you got around the state, I just heard it time and time again, saying, they want, and sometimes I say, well, who did you talk with? Well, I talked with Sue or I talked with Jim. I mean, it's just no formality. They knew the person to talk with, and they just went in and it was taken care of. And that's as a Vermonter, that made me feel pretty darn good. And with that, I thank you all, and I thank you for the opportunity to be with you. And Emily will fill me in if there's others, and I'm going to slip out. But you're looking good, Joe.
Thank you so much, Senator Leahy, for spending time with us and for taking time away from the Secretary of Defense to meet with us first. So we'll remember that.
He's a good guy. I hope he comes to Vermont sometimes. I'm 6'2" and fairly high. He makes me look like a midget. Like it's almost a cliche to say he has a commanding presence, but he does. So I hope he comes to Vermont. Take care.
Thank you so much, Senator.
Thank you for using the Microsoft sign-in verification system. Please press the pound key to finish your verification.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that. Thank you everybody for joining us. Emily, are you still on the line with us for a while, or?
Yeah, I'm still here. I am happy to hear a little bit more and answer any questions that I can. Just to follow up on what John was just talking about, it would be great if we could follow up by email just a little bit more about the details of the member business lending cap.
Sure, we'd be happy to. I think last I heard, and Joe was keeping an eye on this as well, but CUNA, Credit Union National Association, has proposed in one of the COVID-related bills that the cap be raised temporarily. I think it's through about a year or 2 years after the state of emergency ends. Mm-hmm. But obviously, our goal would be to have that cap lifted permanently. I think, we've talked about this in various stages over the years, as I noted. We may not have talked to you, Emily, but one of the big influences is that as each of us gets closer to the cap, and I think, it's not imminent for us. I think we're at about 60 or 65% of the cap now. But as we get closer, the challenge becomes managing that cap. And we've all been there. We've been as high as 95 before. So it's as you, I'm sure, experience with many industries. This is one of those areas that for us, this is the time to try to get that resolved if we can. And so as those bills get clarified, we will reach out to you and make sure you're aware of those details.
Yeah, that would be great. I will put my email address in the chat so that you're able to send me details about that. It'd be really useful to know sort of specifically where those regulations live in law, just to understand it a little bit better and understand the challenge.
I will get that information to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll follow up with you, Emily, for sure on that. And I know that, even though, Vermont credit unions as a group aren't, precariously close to the cap today, as John referenced, some of them were sometimes back. That doesn't mean that there's not other credit unions across the country that are encroaching on that cap or have already bumped up against it. So it is a national issue. One thing that might be worth circling back to, and by the way, if anybody has any comments or questions for Emily, please use that chat box to type them up right now. But I want to circle back to Senator Leahy's comment about cybersecurity. We have had a couple speakers from both Norwich and Champlain College joining us in this group, talking about cybersecurity overall and whatnot. And it has become more, what's the right word, risen to the surface more during the pandemic. Just awareness is heightened both from consumers, from credit unions and businesses in general and whatnot. And we've spoken with the senator and some of your staff for a number of years now about the need for a national data security law that addresses the safe handling of consumer financial information. Credit unions and healthcare are probably the most heavily regulated industries dealing with all of our confidential information. And for a long time now, and I think we've shared this with some of your fellow staff members, financial services, banks and credit unions alike, have felt that everybody that touches that credit card or debit card or any other financial institution information that belongs to any of us in the process of doing their business, should treat that information as securely as financial institutions are required to treat that information. And if they don't, then they should carry the same liabilities, financial and otherwise, for not treating that information as carefully as they should. And so we're still, pursuing that and still concerned about that because, as it sits now, as far as, data security related to financial transactions, as you well know, as someone who's probably got credit cards and debit cards in your wallet, it's the card issuer that carries the financial responsibility for the most part, for losses incurred and replacement of cards and everything to do with that and whatnot. And so, we're very concerned that, the organizations that are accepting those plastic payment for those transactions, are not incented always. I'm not saying all of them, but some of them are incented to care for that information as carefully as, some others are. So it continues to be an issue of concern to us.
Yeah, can I just ask a clarifying question on that? I'm just curious if there are sort of other industries that have a distribution of liability that you think would be more of an appropriate model, either healthcare data or something else?
So there's a lot of people on the line in credit unions in a lot of different capacities that are a lot closer to the issue than I am on a daily basis. I can't speak to financial services because that's not where I work. But as far as financial related information for financial institutions is concerned, I don't know that any other sectors are treated differently than this. We're highly regulated, but the people on the other side of the transaction, those that are accepting payments, are not heavily regulated in a similar way and don't have the same responsibility and liability for those transactions. Anybody else got any comment? I see one comment in the chat from Scott. Scott, if you're on the line still, do you want to just chime in and share your thoughts?
Hi, Joe. This is Scott. As someone who's directly tasked with working on cybersecurity, I'm just curious if there is some sort of a network, whether it's through AVCU or some other organization where we can tie our local cybersecurity professionals together to network, share, learn, share intelligence. And I know that's not directly to where you were speaking before, but that's something as a local professional, I would love to be able to connect with my cyber peers to say, hey, we're seeing this, or did you guys know about that, etc. Just some sort of an information network. And I don't know if that exists or if it's something we can start building.
I don't know the answer to that either, Scott, but it seems like something that I would assume probably exists in some capacity, whether it's very local or much broader already. And I'm wondering if the folks at Champlain or Norwich are involved with anything along those kinds of lines. And anybody else have any insight?
Scott, this is John Dwyer. Just send me an email with your contact and I'll have Mike Stridesberg, who's our CISO, reach out to you. There are at least one local group that he participates in, and there's also, I believe, a credit union national group, so he can connect you.
Great, thanks. Yes, I know Mike, and we've talked about just these issues, but I'm wondering if there's an appetite for a broader coalition, that's not just one or two credit unions, if we can kind of band together the same way that AVCU does. Just a thought.
Joe, this is Molly Dillon.
Hey, Molly.
I thought I might add something to Emily's question about liability. So on your credit card where we now have the chip instead of just the mag stripe on the back, that's been used for a long time in Europe. Wasn't used here adopted here as early as there, because in Europe, the retailers bear some responsibility, which is why they don't have the mag stripe. And one of the reasons why there was a delay here, because they didn't want any of that liability, of course. So I'm going to guess the influence of their lobbying organizations is huge, but it's a little bit unique to the United States that it all falls on the banks no matter what happens. Thanks.
Okay, Molly, that's really useful. That's really useful to know that there are other places in the world that this is not the case. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Molly. Sorry, go
Oh,
ahead, Emily.
I just was going to add, Scott was speaking before, and I did just want to reassure him. I'm not sure if the senator read the chat, but I did email him your message about your wife's birthday and taking a picture that you put in the chat. So he has received that.
Thank you kindly, Emily.
And I don't know if you're aware, Emily, but Molly is the one of the deputy commissioners of the Department of Financial Regulation. And she often joins us on these discussions, and we appreciate that very much. And she has a lot of insights on cybersecurity from her circles.
Fantastic to virtually get to meet you.
Hey, any other comments or questions from anybody that you want to put in the chat, or just unmute and bring it up directly if that's easier at this point? Well, it looks like we're kind of winding down, folks, unless somebody wants to throw something out at the last minute here. In short of that, I want to thank you all so much for joining us. Emily, thank you for joining us and for carving time out of the senator's schedule to be with us. We very much appreciate it. I know it's squeezed in between a couple of other things.